in. As much as the moderators may very well be biased, we'll see about that. I know they were the first time.
It's pretty obvious to us that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance do not share our values in any way.
So how are the candidates preparing for the biggest showdown of their political career? Well, reports suggest that Senator Vance has been preparing for the debate for over a month. Senior Trump advisor Jason Miller is involved in preparations, and Vance has been closely studying Walz's debate style and policy record and intends to attack the Minnesota governor's left-wing views. Mock debate sessions are also being conducted, and House Majority Whip Tom Emmer has been standing in for Walz. Emmer has spent the past month studying Walz's mannerisms to help Vance prepare. Governor Tim Walz, on the other hand, has been working with a close team of advisors. His team includes people who helped Kamala Harris in her debate preparation, along with longtime aides. According to reports, the Transportation Secretary is standing in for Vance during mock debate sessions. This debate presents an opportunity for both Tim Walz and J.D. Vance to introduce themselves to a national audience, as their names are largely limited to their respective states, with the winner expected to establish himself as a national leader. With Vishal Vivek, Parmeshwar Bava for NDTV World.
For more, we're now joined by Voice of America reporter Jessica Stone. Jessica, give us an overview of the debate rules tonight. What are the rules of the game?
Yeah, so the debate at 9 p.m. local time is going to be 90 minutes in its own length. It's got 2 breaks with about 4 minutes each. And one key difference here is that unlike the ABC debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, there will be no real-time fact-checking from the journalists that are asking the questions. We have Margaret Brennan, the Face the Nation moderator and the outgoing host of CBS's evening news program. They're going to be the moderators too. So 2 hard-hitting women. One other interesting difference between the debates of the past for vice presidents, this will not be seated. It will be standing. That's the first time since 2008 that that's the case. And both of these candidates, they're both white, Midwestern, middle-aged gentlemen. You could even say Tim Walz is a little older than middle-aged, right? Because he is a grandfather. But they both have a lot in common. Of course, they're going to focus on their differences tonight. We know that J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, who is the vice presidential running mate for Donald Trump, he's been in the limelight a little bit longer because he's been on the ticket a little bit longer. He's going to be focusing on painting Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, as a left-wing radical. And he's been studying the debate style and the policies that Tim Walz has supported. That is his agenda tonight. We know that he's been training in mock debates with his wife and Trump advisor Jason Miller. As for Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who's also the vice presidential running mate of Kamala Harris, he's going to take the time to introduce himself to the public, because remember, he is a newer face for American voters. And he also has said that he wants to underline Kamala Harris's main objectives and policy, and he's going to take that to Walz. One key difference as well, I want to point out, is that these 2 candidates, unlike the last debate, their microphones are going to be left open while the other person is responding. They're going to have 2 minutes to answer the question. The other person has 2 minutes to rebut, then 1 minute each to go back and forth. But their microphones are going to be open the whole time. What that means is that they could interrupt each other, engage in debate. We could see a real clash of ideas. We could also see them talking over each other. So there's been some criticism about how this is set up. We'll have to see how it works in terms of really fleshing out the ideas of these vice presidential candidates. Again, this could be the last debate of the presidential cycle. We have Election Day in just about a month's time. Back to you.
Voice of America reporter there, Jessica Stone, joining us. Thank you very much. Let's stay with all things debate. For more, we're joined by Allister. He's a Republican strategist and a former U.S. Senate candidate. Riyadh Kazmi is a Democratic strategist. Both of them are joining us this morning. David, Riyadh, let me come to you first, actually. Some reports say that Walz doesn't particularly like debate prep or debates per se. Compare that to Vance, who thrives on debates. Also, in terms of recent preparedness, Vance has been at, relentlessly appearing on TV networks. Tim Walz has done fewer national TV interviews. If there's one thing that worries you about Vance tonight, his performance, what would it be?
I would say that the difference you have between the two of them is, Senator Vance is a lawyer by trade, and we all know that, similar to me, you go to law school, you do learn how to debate, and you do a fairly decent job doing it, right? Governor Walz, on the other hand, is a school teacher who's a football coach that people like. I think what you're going to see in this debate is a clear dichotomy on ideas and issues. And I know that in your segment leading up to this, Senator, when you were talking about Senator Vance, you had said he was going to focus on Governor Walz's left-leaning ideas. But if you look at some of Governor Walz's initiatives in the state of Minnesota, he made the largest public school investment of over $2 billion and provided free breakfast and lunch at schools. And I don't think that that is a conservative or liberal idea nor agenda. I think everyone wants kids who don't have food the ability to eat. And so what I would say is we're going to see very, very distinct ideas, but we're also going to see who these people really are. We'll see if Senator Vance is able to not come across as smug. Some people would say Senator Vance, I know he thinks he's much smarter than Governor Walz. And I think you're going to see Governor Walz's personality when Senator Vance attacks him. And I think people are going to be very receptive to that.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about that personality coming through and the attacks. Alex, now, Tim Walz was the first to start calling Vance and Trump weird. It's a catchphrase now used by the Democrats. It's become widely popular on social media as well. It's likely that Walz is going to milk that on the debate stage tonight. What will Vance need to do really to make sure that that weird label does not stick?
Yeah, well, Tim Walz obviously rode that label all the way to the nomination, and I guess that's where the ideas kind of petered out. J.D. Vance is going to take control of this debate early on. He's not just a graduate of Yale, he's a former U.S. Marine. He knows how to train, he knows how to study. He's going to bring both of those things to bear during that debate tonight. I think that he's got the ability to stop the fire hose of lies we're going to see from Tim Walz's mouth through sheer willpower and intellect, and I think the focus from J.D. Vance is going to be on people. He's a guy who grew up in rural Ohio. He's a guy who understands regular working people and what they go through. And I think that J.D. Vance is going to have a real opportunity here to focus people's attention on the plight of those folks in North Carolina and Tennessee, clinging to their rooftops, looking for aid in that devastation caused by Hurricane Helene and the Biden administration's failure to effectively respond to what is a true regional crisis right now.
All right, Alex and Riyadh, we have another guest joining us on our panel today. That's David K. Johnston, a professor of public policy at Rochester Institute of Technology. David is also a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter. So welcome, David. David, what do you think? You've been hearing some of those comments. What are you looking for tonight's debate? Far more colorful than what we heard from perhaps Trump and Harris in that debate. I simply say that because tonight the mics are going to be unmuted.
Well, there's also going to be no fact-checking of either of the candidates, which I think is journalistic malpractice. There should be fact-checking. Clearly, J.D. Vance is going to try and use his skills as someone who went to law school and got a lawyer's license to try and undo whatever he can from his opponent. Now, both of them are military veterans. Very briefly, Vance was in the military as a public information officer in the Marines. Governor Walz served 24 years in the National Guard and rose to the highest rank of non-commissioned officer can reach who's in the field. I think you're going to see a lot of discussion in an effort by Vance to unsettle the governor of Minnesota, and I expect that you will hear a lot about some of the very strange issues that have been promoted by Senator Vance. For example, he is an advocate of someone who says that we should replace the United States president with a dictator. We should shut down any corporation that operates contrary to the dictator's interests, and all university property should be seized by the government and sold to developers after firing all 100% of the federal workforce. Those are pretty radical ideas, and I'll be surprised if Governor Walz doesn't bang on those as hard as he can.
Rhea, let's talk a little bit about Vance kind of rattling Walz. Now, in some past debates of Walz, he's apparently shown to be a little irritated on stage or even angry. Case in point, when he was criticized over his response to the riots in his state after George Floyd was killed. Now, that was during 2022, the governor's debate race. Walz faced off with his opponent and seemed annoyed. Now, J.D. Vance has already said things like Tim Walz allowed rioters to burn down Minneapolis. Now, keeping all that in mind, is it going to be difficult for Walz, do you think, to keep that composure of his?
Well, I think that's one of the things Walz's team is going to work on very hard, is getting him to not let his emotions or temper get in the way. And by the way, Minneapolis was not burned down. There were fires. It turns out the biggest one started by anti-demonstrators seeking to create trouble. They're the ones who instigated the worst of the examples there. It's also not the governor's job to intervene. That's the job of the mayor of Minneapolis.
All right. David, the LA Times headline on the debate today called it Mad Dad, referring to Vance, versus Rad Dad, referring to Walz. A good characterization, would you say?
Well, I don't think there's anything radical about Walz. I mean, Walz favors things like, why do we audit kids for school lunches when 97% of the kids at some schools qualify for free lunches? Why not just provide free lunches to kids as a cost to the taxpayers? And that's, seemingly about as radical as he gets. I mean, this is a man who grew up on a farm. He understands farming as a business. And he served for 24 years in the National Guard. So I don't buy my former employer, I worked at one time for the LA Times, the idea that he's radical, but he's certainly been painted that way by Team Trump.
Right. Alex, you've been patiently waiting to jump in. Go right ahead.
Well, I really can't wait, David, until you get me a deal on that land in Columbia University in the heart of Manhattan that's apparently going to be available. I've never heard J.D. Vance talk about the idea of completely breaking up universities in that fashion. I don't even know what Rad Dad means, but I can tell you this much. I can tell you that when Tim Walz says things like free speech does not apply to what the government deems misinformation, that's a radical idea that a lot of Americans don't like. When Tim Walz and Vice President Harris say they want an assault weapons ban, that's a radical idea as well. When Tim Walz, when you look at his history of being cozy with communist China, that's a radical idea that Americans don't like. I don't think it's going to be very difficult at all for J.D. Vance to paint Tim Walz as a radical, because he is. And I certainly hope that it is a very friendly debate, but certainly if J.D. Vance can get under Tim Walz's skin, he's got to be watching that debate video of Walz losing his temper like the pro that he is. Maybe one explosion of temper can make or break a debate. We'll see what happens tonight.
We'll certainly be looking for that. Now, Riyadh, realistically, how much might this VP debate move the needle? Ordinarily, one might say not much, but given that this is a race that is so razor thin, what do you think?
I would say that I think that Senator Vance has made
Riyadh,
himself.
go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think that Senator Vance has made himself more part of the spotlight with some of the outlandish, crazy things he has said when he's talked about Springfield, Ohio, and Haitians eating pets. I think you're going to see that he has very outlandish, absurd, non-factual statements that he makes. And I think that Governor Walz is going to be prepared for that. Governor Walz is a gamer. Yeah, you talk. The gentleman talked about how he served in the military. He talked about how he was a school teacher. We talked about how he was a state championship high school football coach. That doesn't make him qualified to be vice president, but what that does allow him to do is relate to people. And I think that people are going to relate to him. I think that this is going to be an opportunity for, let's be honest, not many people who are going to watch the debate, but the people who are going to watch the debate and the media who is going to continue to talk about the debate for a few days will get the opportunity to see outlandish ideas from Senator Vance, reasonable, middle-class, Midwestern American Governor Walz in his statements.
Right. the three of us, and myself included, definitely going to be watching the debate tonight. Thanks very much indeed, David, Alex, and Riyadh there joining us this morning here on NDTV. Now, in other news, as voter registration deadlines approach in many states and early voting begins in several others, both the Trump and Harris campaigns are focusing on key demographics, especially one particular one to gain a particular advantage. Both sides particularly have their eyes on Asian American voters as they see an opportunity among the fastest growing segment of the electorate of any major racial and ethnic group. NDTV's Vishal Vivek brings us this report. All right, unfortunately, can't get you that report right now, but we have something else lined up, quite special. The big prize in the US elections remains on who will win the White House, but Americans will also be voting for members of the Congress, the House Representatives. There are over 400 seats up for grabs from across the country, and one of them is from the state of Virginia. We're now joined by Suhas Subramaniam, who is a Democrat. He could make history by becoming the first Indian American elected to Congress from the state of Virginia. So a leap into national politics. Suhas is currently a member of the Virginia Senate, which is a role at the state level. Welcome, Suhas. Firstly, Suhas, how does it feel? A bit of nerves, I'm guessing, a bit of excitement. What's it like to be in your shoes as we head to November 5th when voters decide if they want you as their congressman?
It's all excitement right now. I think having an Indian American at the top of the ticket, as well as someone who's as dynamic and strong as Kamala Harris, has really excited a lot of people in our community, and both the Indian American community as well as non-Indian American community. And so we're ready for it. And I've never seen so much enthusiasm, so many volunteers coming to our office. So it's exciting, and we're happy about the way things are looking.
All right, so let's talk about Project 2025, the conservative blueprint for Republicans. It's a to-do list on what needs to change in the US if Trump wins the elections. Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, saying he has nothing to do with it. But what is it about Project 2025 that concerns you? You've called it a complete disaster for your district, given the thousands of federal workers and contractors who live there.
Yeah, it simply calls for all of them to be fired, essentially, and be replaced by Trump's people. And by doing that, one, you're losing the civil service in our federal government, which has so much institutional knowledge. And two, it leads to a system of cronyism, where your buddies are getting the contracts, where Trump is deciding where all the spending goes, and where you're losing any sort of check on the political side of running these agencies. And so, and for our economy here in Northern Virginia and the DC area, it would be a disaster because all the people who work in the federal social service here would be fired. And that means the restaurants they go to would be affected. Everything would be hurt in our community by having this happen. So we can't let it happen.
Okay. Now, your Republican rival, Mike Clancy, whom you are up against, says you are doing nothing but fear-mongering. He is, in fact, not a supporter of Project 2025, is what he says, nor does he have any connections with the Heritage Foundation. That's the think tank that published the report on Project 2025. So what's the problem here?
Well, he is a member of the Heritage Foundation. It's on his bio. It was on his website, but he scrubbed it in the last couple of months. And he supports all of the tenets of Project 2025. So he may not like the branding, but it's his platform. And he was a member of the group and funded the group even that wrote it. And so we saw that he even admitted it in our last candidate forum that he funded them in the past couple of years. He just, now that it's unpopular, now that Donald Trump doesn't like the branding, people in Donald Trump's party, like my opponent, are starting to step away from it. But if Donald Trump embraced it, he would embrace it too, because that's kind of where the Republican Party in America is right now. They just kind of go wherever Donald Trump tells them to.
As well as your opponent, Mike Clancy, he claims that bringing up Project 2025 is a way for you and others to sideline the real issues here, the Biden administration's failures, things like the economy, cost of living, border security. How much of this is really you deflecting from those key issues that really concern many, many voters?
Oh no, we're talking about those too, and so does Project 2025. Project 2025, the impact it would have on our economy, like I said, because we're so federally focused, and federal civil service is a big part of our economy. That you can't talk about the economy without talking about what Project 2025 will do. And it also talks about education, which is very important to our community. I want to make sure we're fully funding schools and fully funding federal education programs for our students. And Project 2025 talks about cutting funding for education and eliminating entirely the Department of Education, which my opponent has been on the record as supporting all of the things I just talked about. And so, again, it may not like the branding, but he's a part of the group that wrote it, and he seems to embrace the agenda. He just, again, doesn't like it because Donald Trump doesn't like it.
Right, to us now, some 22% of voters are South Asian in your district. Much of your campaign funding has reportedly come from them. Now, in an article 2 days ago in a Northern Virginia publication, I came across a column regarding concerns from at least one Muslim voter that they feel that they may not be represented enough via your candidacy, the criticism being that your campaign has these donations from largely Hindu groups. What do you have to say to them?
I have just as many donations from non-Hindu groups, especially Muslim groups. And in fact, the past 5 years, I've represented one of the largest Muslim communities in the state. And I'll be a representative for everyone, and I'll make sure that they have a voice. And in the end, there's so many ways to divide us. And I'm someone who's united us. So it doesn't matter,
Right.
religion, race, political party. I've done that my whole career, and I'll continue to do that.
So, Has, finally, here's the toughest question of the day. What's going down in the Subramaniam household, given your daughters, Maya and Nina, both lovely Indian-sounding names, are featured in your campaign video? What do they think? And by the way, I think that Maya got considerably more airtime than Nina.
Maya is a feature actress. She's very good on camera, but they're not quite sure what's going on yet. They just see Daddy on TV a lot and see Daddy signs, but they're very supportive. And I'm looking forward to being in Congress because a lot of this is about them and their future.
Right. Thanks very much indeed. That was Suhas Subramaniam. Good luck in your campaign. Hope to speak to you around November 5th. That's all that we have time for here on US Election Watch. I'm Allister D'Souza in Washington, D.C.